Hi, I'm Bo Humphreys, and this is the Personal Finance Show. It is May 24th, 2020, and this is week number, I don't even know, is it 9, 8 of my COVID-19 series. What I'm doing is I was taking a break from the podcast for a bit, like the rest of my life. Take care of my son and start my full-time job as an insolvency counselor. And there wasn't any urgency for me to come back. I knew I was going to come back and podcast at some point, but my show was, long format, hour-long stories with people, and took some time to edit and to put guests and to talk about things. And so I was just like, when the time is right. Then this pandemic happened, and I was thinking, I have this infrastructure, this framework where I can reach people. Why don't we bring it back and not worry so much about getting back to the format while we're in this situation, but focus more about connecting with people and finding out how people are handling this and finding out what is out there to help us. How are we going to survive? Giving people information at the same time talking about people's stories. And I've been going around the world. This week, we're going to stay a little closer to home. I have Matthew Siwiec. Is that the right way to pronounce that?
Yeah, you got it.
Perfect. You've coached me before, so that's good. And you're in Toronto, right?
That's right, yes.
West End?
Yeah. Pretty much on the border with Mississauga.
Isolated in your home?
Yeah, unfortunately.
So Matthew's on because we're going to spend some time going through what I like to call the alphabet soup of benefits available to Canadians, and they're all over the board, and everybody's confused with them on a daily basis. And but before we get into that, just tell me a little bit about your pandemic experience. So you were already working from home, right?
I was, yeah. So it wasn't as big of a transition for me as it was for other individuals, but at the same time, it has been difficult. Just, not really having any structure. I've been finding that it's really disorientating. I'm sure as many other people have, right? And being self-employed, I could work whenever I want, so including weekends. So, not having that structure, I found at first was probably one of the most difficult things. But now probably about 2-3 weeks and I start to feel more comfortable with it. But I feel like, being self-employed and working from home was able to, to adapt to it possibly quicker than other individuals.
And we met at an event, most recently. We might have met before that. Did we meet before that? Before Sandy Young's book party?
Yeah, there were a couple times where we met briefly.
Yeah, before. But I think we kind of connected more at this event. And that was the last event that I went to.
Same here.
What about you? Yeah, right?
It's so weird.
What was that early March? I forget now.
It was just the tail end of February. Okay. And like you, it's kind of like the last big event that, I remember before everything went down.
Yeah, when I see photos, when Sandy posts photos, I'm thinking everyone's so close to each other. Well, how was that a thing? You and Rubina and Jessica, posing in front of the backdrop. I'm like, no, stay away from each other. That's not safe. That's not safe, right? Because that's where we're at now. But we have to explain now if we post a photo from the past that no, that's not now.
Absolutely, yeah. We get in trouble.
I'm not doing it now, right? So, like in terms of making money, are you in the same sort of ability to make money? Were you getting events and speaking gigs that you can't do now?
Yeah, so there definitely was a bit of adjustment phase. So I found that probably a week or two afterwards, I did have some appointments that were already set up, and they were just converted to through Zoom and Google Hangouts, whatever people felt comfortable with. Okay. And then once people kind of digested what was happening, things started to pick up again, and the presentations that I was giving essentially were converted to webinars. So I've actually been doing a lot of training just based on the different type of government benefits that are out there. And, and as we were discussing earlier, it's just like so confusing and they change so frequently, right? It's like 1 week you're able to do something, next week you're not able to. And it's just, leaving a lot of people wondering, is this going to work for me or is it not?
Are you recording these webinars ahead of time, or are they live?
They're live.
Yeah, and that's so. Like, are you finding, like anything like I wish I had a faster internet or other things like that? Like, are you noticing limitations for now that this is all digital? Anything, or is it all kind of running smoothly?
Yeah, so I mean, it's moving very smoothly. People are definitely seem to be enjoying it, but the thing that I find to be the most challenging is not knowing if you're engaging with a person, right? Because when you have the large groups, there's no camera, right? And it's essentially just you speaking into the microphone for a while and answering questions in a chat box. So like you hope that you have people's attention, but you're never 100% sure. But once you get used to that, then it feels like it flows a little bit better.
What's funny too is that even if you did have a camera on the audience, say, the reaction would probably be delayed, and so so whatever you'd be trying to feed off the audience would be like, I don't know, did they get that joke, or and then you hear laughter a second later, and so it's all also disconnected. It's not meant for like live, right?
Yeah.
This is not meant to replace live in person. It's either
Absolutely.
like it may be a conversation between the two of us because there's just two feeds running here, and that's what we can manage. But I think a lot of technology is going to catch up to this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a musician, and the music world, every collaboration you're seeing out there is pre-recorded and assembled. There's no chance that anything that you're seeing has ever been done live, because that technology doesn't exist right now. You'd have to have the fastest internet possible on both ends to be able to be timed. Like, there's going to be always a split-second delay.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not quite there. We're not a real-time internet yet. But I think this will probably accelerate that. Right?
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, this would be the time that, there would be the need, right?
Exactly. So, okay, so you're spending a lot of time on these benefits, and I want to kind of contrast to where we were before and what options are there today. So, I mean, the obvious thing is there was employment insurance before, right?
Yeah. And
there was a bit of do you know anything about how it worked before in terms of the delays? Like, how long would it take for you to get approved and paperwork and things like that?
Yeah, so it really depended on the amount of traffic that would be sent to employment insurance. So depending on the situation that occurred.
Sure.
But usually, you would hear, 3 weeks to, over a month in some cases. Because for a lot of people, the application process can just be timely because, very often you have the activation code that's mailed to you. You have to put it in, that delays things. And, if an application has any, kind of information that needs to be, fact checked, or something's, possibly, not accepted by this Service Ontario, Service Canada, that would delay things even further, right? And there was also the waiting period as well. You would have to wait, 1 full week before you even received your benefits for most of them. So there's definitely a delay that would occur when someone was applying for it, and it could definitely be timely, unfortunately, in many cases.
So employment insurance, that's how it worked before, and then, of course, that would still exist if you're in a situation where you were working and now you had to be laid off. They originally recommended, well, of course, go on employment insurance, and their first thing they said was, we'll waive that 1 week waiting period, say, right, to try to make it easier. And then what happened? Like 2 million people applied for employment insurance? Yeah,
it turned into a disaster. And if you had any questions, which everyone did, you couldn't reach anyone.
Okay. Yeah. So that they knew right away that, well, they might have even known before that wasn't going to work by itself. Even before they considered who might qualify, they started talking about this first alphabet soup thing called the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. Right?
Yes, the CERB.
The CERB, yeah.
Yes.
I talk about CERB all the time, and it's become a household word. and even in my daily business as well, because a lot of people I talk to are on the CERB.
Yeah.
And it's because, well, a lot of people on the CERB because of the fact that they couldn't get EI, even though they might have qualified because of the overload, right? Is that sort of the main? Did everyone start flowing immediately to the CERB if they were on an EI delay? Is that how that worked originally?
Oh, it was a messy transition. So
Sure.
so I don't know if you remember how it went. A lot of people were applying for EI. They thought that's how they had to do it. And the government then, made public some measures saying that, if you qualified for EI before March 15th, you would have to continue taking EI, even if it was less than the CERB, right? So I know a lot of people were affected by that because people started to get laid off even before March 15th, especially in like the hospitality sector and like, restaurants, bars, that kind of stuff. And, a lot of times I spoke to individuals and they would, be receiving EI payments of just like a few $100s. And
really?
because they qualified before that cutoff mark, they were ineligible to receive the CERB benefits, right? Which puts them at a pretty large disadvantage. And this was kind of, seemed like it was randomly sprung up, right? And took a lot of people by surprise. For people that qualified for EI after March 15th, then they're automatically rolled into the CERB program, right? And if, for those people, if you had an EI payment that would be more than the $500 per week under the CERB, you would still be forced to take the $500 through CERB. So there was a bit of frustration through that, yeah.
Yeah, so people who are getting less than CERB when they just had to wait a little longer, it's a bad timing for them. And then those after who might have got more through EI program had to take less, some of them. So at least, some people benefited by just having the 2,000. I'd say 2,000, but you're right. It's 500 a week for 4 weeks and 16 weeks total throughout between now and December or something like that, right? But they're saying if you are on CERB, you use all that up, do your 16 weeks, and then you can get your EI benefits after that, right?
That's right, yeah, if you qualify for it.
If you qualified, yeah.
Yeah,
so
at the time, yeah.
Those people who are used to living on a lot more than 2,000 a month are going to have to sort of be on survival mode for now and then get a little bit more when the CERB runs out. Yeah. From EI, if that all goes smoothly, which of course we hope all of this is running smoothly, but we don't know. There's a lot of volume issues here, right, that people can't even consider, just overload.
Absolutely.
And because we've never seen anything like this before. This is also, I don't like to overuse unprecedented, but that's really the key word of the day, right? Yeah. Unprecedented is what everyone keeps saying, but I like to call them strange and weird times as well. So that's sort of the basic. If for people who qualified for employment insurance who were employed, they either got EI or they got the CERB.
That's right. Yeah.
That's only a few people in Canada. I mean, that's a lot of people, but it's not everybody, right?
That's
There's
right,
a lot of people who are self-employed, and we'll get to students as well. But let's go to the self-employed people. So the CERB was made to encapsulate people who were not covered by EI as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and being self-employed myself too, I definitely kept a close eye on this, and I help a lot of people that are small businesses. Mm-hmm. And some of actually the webinars that I've given have been for like individuals in the arts industry and stuff like that that are classified as being self-employed. But in our field, it's the kind of thing where, if a job comes up, you kind of have to take it, right? And when it was first launched through CERB, like you couldn't have any income, right?
Any income. That was odd, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
That's a little punishing for people who, what, you're going to turn down the only available job you might be getting during this time so you can get the $2,000?
Yeah.
I don't know about that. So they amended that a bit, though.
They did, yeah. So now you could earn up to $1,000 based on the conditions of the period.
But what I'm hearing is if you earn $1,100, that disqualifies you from the CERB. Am I right about that? Is that what they're currently saying?
Yeah, unfortunately. There may be a
give it back?
That's what they're saying right now, yeah. There's actually a portal, like in the CRA My Account portal, there's actually now a section where you could, repay back the money if you don't qualify for it afterwards.
But that doesn't make a lot of sense, right? It should be the difference. Are they? Have you heard any talk about whether they're still negotiating how that's going to actually work, or have they made a concrete decision? Like, if you make more than 1,000, then you didn't qualify for the CERB at all, so you only get $1,000.
Yeah,
is that how it is right now?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say anything's concrete with any of these benefits we've seen.
That's a good point. Yeah,
it's just wait for the the 11:15 press conference and
yeah, I guess
something could change
all the time. But we should be preparing for what we know to be the rules, right? So I mean,
Exactly.
what that tells me is that really be careful as to what money that you make if you're taking the CERB. Keep an eye on that, and I don't know. I don't like. Hopefully, like if there's something that's a big opportunity for you, like a $3,000 opportunity, maybe take that, right?
Yeah.
And then give your CERB back. But it sounds not very motivating. What are you hearing from people?
Yeah, it definitely is causing some people to turn, like, if you're self-employed, to turn down some jobs. If you're an employee, you're disqualified if you quit from your job. So there are a lot of what I think is going to be some, legal matters that arise after this whole situation, which is maybe a further question. But yeah, no, I've seen some people, being discouraged from doing it, unfortunately. And, very likely what's going to happen is, once they actually start accounting for, who deserves to have this money, it's going to get really messy.
Like on one hand, I of course, we all need this money. I was just talking on the Dear Ruby podcast with Rubina about the fact that the Bank of Canada says if we didn't have all this a relief from the government, then we would be toast, right? So, like, overall, it's good to have this, but it seems like it's limiting people whose cost of living is higher than that and possibly putting them into more trouble. So that there's, I guess, pros and cons to this kind of nationwide system. And for a pandemic that we've never had to deal with before.
Absolutely.
And so as the time went on, it's in the last 2 months, I guess, they started coming up with other things. Let's stick with individuals for now, even though it's skipping ahead past the business stuff, which came out earlier. But let's go to the student benefit, right? Because people were saying, I don't know if this all came from feedback as they were getting it live, but hey, I'm a student and I was expecting to have a summer job or ability to make money on the side, and now I got nothing. What can you do for me? And so they did come up with something, right?
Yeah, thankfully they did. I mean, that was one of the biggest pitfalls that was brought up once the CERB details were originally announced. We had a lot of students that were like, I'm out of luck. What am I going to do? Right? Because you have these people that that have just recently graduated or are about to graduate, starting a career. Maybe they had a work placement lined up or something like that. Didn't officially start with the job. And then, all of a sudden, their opportunities dry up and they're like, what am I going to do now? Right. Yeah. So that was a big issue that came up. Thankfully, they were listened to by the government. But the new benefit's called the Canada Emergency Student Benefit. Surprise, surprise. very, very similar
There's
name.
some similarities in the naming. They didn't spend a lot of time on those, but yeah.
Yeah, there definitely are a lot of Canada emergency benefits.
Yes.
So the basic idea behind this one is that eligible students will receive up to $1,250 per 4-week period. And I guess it's important to point out that a lot of these benefits are tied to 4-week periods and not actual months.
Yeah, we should continue to reframe that. You're right. Emphasize that it's 4 weeks, not a month.
Yeah, it confuses a lot of people. So this benefit lasts for up to 4 payments too, similar to the CERB payment. And if someone is disabled, taking care of a child under 12, or taking care of a dependent that has a disability, they're able to receive an extra $750.
That gets it closer to the CERB. So they basically, if you have a dependent of some kind, you get, it's like CERB for students.
Yeah.
So they kind of made it equivalent there. I just wanted to point out while we're talking about that, if you have 7 children, you still get only $2,000 from the CERB, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I just wanted to point that out because that does not seem fair at all. Now, you're getting child tax benefit. I understand.
Hmm.
But if you were, actually, if you have 7 kids, maybe you're not having a lot of time for work. But, if you have 1 kid or 2 kids or 3 kids, you still get the same amount for CERB. And like in addition, if you were making more than $2,000 a month from your income, you were already relying on your basic child tax benefit.
Yeah.
And now, just on the side, we can mention that everyone's getting an extra $300 in child tax in May,
Hmm.
but I can say that is not a lot of money
No,
at all.
and it's up to $300 too. So
Yeah, if you
yeah,
qualify, that's the maximum. So if you
yeah,
don't get the maximum child tax benefit, you're not getting all of that 300. Is that right?
that's right. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so I mean, I don't know how they come up with these things, but some of them are obviously, they're nice, but what's the point, right? Is it just like to pay buy that extra thing that you needed in the month of May? I'm not sure what the point of some of these are.
Hmm.
If they're meant to continue our standard of living or to help us with extra costs caused by a pandemic. Is there any is there any rhyme or reason to some of the numbers that they've come up with? Have you heard any chatter about that?
Yeah, not specifically with the numbers overall. And I mean, having a national wide program, it would be extremely difficult to do that, right? But
Yeah.
unfortunately, what we're seeing is that, individuals that have high cost of living, like you're saying, which are, usually in city centers like Toronto and, the GTA region even, other places like Calgary and stuff like that, like individuals that have higher costs, the benefit that's, created by these programs, can be less than it would be for other individuals that have lower expenses.
Yeah, so the average is sort of hurting some people,
Yeah.
but on the other hand, I'm hearing some people are making more, right? So than they would have before. I mean, yeah, it's an odd thing to think of it as an average of Canadians. Everyone's situation is so different, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But so they came up with that for the students, but you have to be actively looking for work, right? You have to keep a work log, is what I've read. Is that right?
Yeah, so they say if you're able to work, then you do have to be looking for work, and that at some point the government may ask for proof of some sort.
Yeah. So if you do apply for the CESB, then just make sure you are looking for work and you keep a log of that, so that if you're audited in the future, you don't have to give that money back. Which, if you're still a student, is not going to be fun for you to have to do that.
Oh,
Right?
absolutely.
You need as much money as you can get. Another additional thing, which I believe that my wife is going to qualify for, is a $5,000 grant for volunteering on COVID-related activities,
Yeah,
which will be applied against your school costs. So that's kind
right.
of
Yes.
a nice thing. If you weren't able to get work, but you're available to volunteer, like my wife was working on, because she's a medical student, they've accepted her on the working on the clinical trials for COVID, which COVID drugs or whatever things that they can do to help, right? As opposed to just putting everybody on ventilators. Alternatives. So they're studying all those things at McMaster, and so they needed people to be able to, talk to, like, remotely talk to those who have been affected, and then put them on the trial and that kind of thing. So she should be able to qualify for a $5,000 relief, which is nice because everything costs a little more these days, and medical school is expensive in the first
Very
place.
expensive.
Which she is now doing remotely again too, right? So she doesn't qualify for the CESB because she is in med school and there's no time to work. So she would probably be excluded from that. And that's another thing to note too, right? Is that, if you could have picked up a little bit of work on the side, doing this or that, and but officially you're not looking for work, you don't qualify for the CESB either. And on the CERB side, if you didn't make $5,000 last year, you don't qualify for the CERB either, right?
Yeah,
as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, $5,000 in 2019 or the 12 months leading up to your application.
So if you were just ramping up your income now, and you just hadn't got there yet because you're just starting maybe, right?
Yeah.
There's always going to be people that fall through the cracks with these programs, right? That it's good to identify those, because if we talk about them, then what happens is they create more, and they amended the rules for the CERB and said, okay, if you're like an artist, you can still get some royalties up to the $1,000 and things like that too, right? You can still work a little bit. So they changed things a little bit when needed, and they added a few more categories of people in there. Like, I don't think I think they were basing it on just 2019 income at first, and then they said, okay, but or anything in the last year leading up to today. Right? Was that a change? Do you remember, or did they have that from the beginning?
I think it was from the beginning, but I could be wrong, because they update their online backgrounders so quickly, and they don't really tell you when it's been changed. So
it was probably me who just saw the 5,000 from last year and then wondered, and maybe I didn't get that message of, okay, but it is the last 12 months too, right? So it's about also looking at these things closer and trying to figure out, okay, wait, did I miss something? Do I actually qualify? Or maybe I don't. On the other hand, you can go and apply for the CERB, and you'll probably get it if you qualify or not, because it's not very hard to answer questions one way or the other. Even if you're not trying to be malicious about it, some people are accidentally getting CERB, right? Have you heard about that?
Yeah, there was one person that was reporting it, and they were one of the earlier people that did. And they're like, well, I just accidentally applied to it, and there's no way to give them the money back.
And there wasn't at the time. Yeah, now exactly. There is. It didn't CRA my account. But yeah, it's like, okay, so I got this, and that's not really common. It's like, I mean, sure, you can fudge up your tax return and get a big tax refund by making things up. Everybody knows how illegal that is. And the same kind of applies to the CERB. However, it seems like it's a lot easier to do it in an innocent way and claim that, oh, well, but it wasn't set up right. There's going to be a bit of a fallout on this end, right?
Absolutely, yeah. There definitely will be.
We'll see how that goes. I understand the idea of pushing everything through so people get money and not worrying too much about setting up security features now. But of course, that's just going to result in a lot more issues. So if anybody is getting the CERB right now and you're not sure you're supposed to have it, especially if you don't need it to buy things, don't spend it. Just hold on to it, right? And be careful when you do. If you do apply, just be careful. Call in, I guess, to the government or whatever resources. I think they have a little chat bot on the website too, right? That I saw. That you can just ask questions like, do I actually qualify? Should I do this? Is there a better option for me? So, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say there's also a really good resource about CERB, which is like a common questions and answers.
Okay, yeah.
Where there's probably like 30, 40 different questions that I guess they've been receiving most frequently. And they provide pretty definitive answers there. So that's a good resource to go to first to see, if maybe like that gray area that you're unsure about qualifies or not. You could go there and see if it's addressed. Okay,
well, send that to me and I'll put it in the show notes for sure.
Sure.
That's good. And you've put together some resources too, right? You have an infographic that I liked.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can. I think I shared it maybe previously, but we'll put a link to that too. Is it just like through your website?
Yeah, it's through the website. I'm going to be updating it again shortly. But I'm also putting together a larger central database too with all the programs.
Okay, great.
So I'm in the process of doing that. Just haven't had time this week to do it.
Okay, yeah. Well, when you have that, I'll put it in the show notes so when people are, if they listen to this, they can look, or they can just have your website ready to go. Why don't you say what your website is now?
Sure, it's www.ffcoach.ca.
So it's that's Friendly Financial Coach?
That is, yeah.
Yeah, so Friendly Financial Coach, ffcoach.ca. And you have a podcast, yeah?
I do, yes.
Yeah, so you've talked about these things as well, some of these things, in the last couple of episodes. What's the podcast called?
So it's called Simple Money Podcast.
Okay, so just search Simple Money Podcast in your podcast place. Wherever you listen to this podcast, you could probably find that podcast. So, okay, so let's go over to so a lot of people have small businesses, and you've talked to those people too. Some of them are entrepreneurs, and they qualify for the CERB, but some of them have employees, and some of them pay rent. And so let's talk about those two things. There's programs that were set up for those specific things, right? So wage subsidy, right? Let's talk about that one.
Yeah, so this is where it actually gets messy.
Okay.
So yeah, what we've been finding is that the programs for the individuals and families and stuff like that have been fairly straightforward, but the ones for the businesses have been extremely complicated. And the wage subsidy is actually kind of the pinnacle of that.
Really?
Yeah, because what happens is
So,
that there are multiple formulas that are used to calculate how much you'd receive. But this benefit also interacts with other benefits. So it's, a lot of people are just hiring accountants to figure this out for them. But it definitely can be very complicated for some.
and they have no money to hire accountants right now either because they need a wage subsidy. So on the surface, it sounds pretty simple to me. I have employees, and the government's going to help me pay those employees if I keep them working, but I probably have to pay a little bit, and maybe I pay up front and then I get a reimbursement. On the on the overall, is that sort of how it's supposed to work?
Yeah, the basic idea is that the government gives up to a 75% wage subsidy. And it lasts, they just extended it last week, I believe it was, to up to 24 weeks. So the program runs from March 15th to August 29th as it stands. And the basic idea is that, so you're eligible to receive a percentage of the subsidy back. And to do that, you have to send in essentially like a filing or an application to the government. And then they say about 10 days afterwards, they'll then reimburse you those funds.
So you got to keep your employees on and pay them in full, and have the cash to do that. That's condition number one, right? And then file paperwork and hope that you're approved.
Yeah, pretty much.
What are some basic conditions? What do you have to do to be approved for this?
Oh, I mean, there are quite a few. So basically, you have to have a drop of revenue yourself as a business. So it has to decline by a certain percentage. That's based on a formula. Also, the subsidy that's paid out to the employees is based on a two-part formula as well. So it doesn't you don't actually need to be paying them the same wage that you were paying them pre-crisis.
Okay.
But what it could lead to is a reduced amount of subsidy in some cases.
So there's a formula that says what, based on your revenue before and the size of your business, things like that. Like what you put all those factors in, and then it calculates whether your income, your revenue dropped enough.
Yeah. So first of all, you have to just to be able to use the program, you have to meet those revenue targets.
Okay.
Well, I guess it's a negative target.
Yeah.
And the ways that they do it is that you could either take the average of January and February this year and then compare it to the month that you're applying. Or you could compare the month that you're applying to the previous year's period.
Okay,
and
so that's Formula 1. And then if it meets the thresholds, then you move on.
Yeah, exactly. So for the first period, it has to drop by 15%.
Okay.
And the second period, it has to be by 30%.
Okay, and then there's the separate formula for in terms of wages. You can reduce the wages that you're going to pay in the first place.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to talk about that. There's a lot of algebra involved.
So let's just talk about how that's complicated. So it's not. This is not as simple as it sounds, and it seems like there's a pretty good chance that people are going to think that they qualify and they don't.
Yeah.
And people who need help are not going to be able to get help. Why do you think this one's so complicated versus the CERB and the CESB, for example? Yeah,
so I mean, what we generally see is that the programs that target businesses are more difficult, right? Mm-hmm. Because I guess there's the stigma of giving money to businesses, right? So they want to make sure that everything's done properly, and I guess actually I should say too, for this program. Last time I checked at the actual costs of all the programs, this was actually the most expensive program out of all of them. So this actually, the cost that they projected to administer this program, and this was before they even extended it, was much larger than the CERB program. So that was probably also something that they were, taking into consideration.
Wow. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on here that I don't understand, in terms of politics and policy and how hard this stuff is to do, right? So
yeah,
it's I just want everything to be easy, right? that's kind of the way that I see it. It's like, okay, great, work out all the details you need to do, but for people who are not politicians and policymakers, make it let's all work together So that's that. So maybe if you qualify, you can keep your employees on, keep your business running. If you got people coming in to your business, so like I don't know. When did this start? Did they start to open this up a while ago, the wage subsidy, or is it just happening now?
It was launched fairly recently. I think it's maybe about 2-3 weeks or so that it's been.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on that, but it's fairly new.
No, you're not being quoted on anything. No worries. This everybody knows that anything that we're saying it should be verified by going to the site and checking it out. We're just trying to point you in the right direction, right?
Absolutely.
And also just discuss these options so that if you think that maybe you qualify or you don't qualify, or just being aware of what the government's trying to do. Mm-hmm. And on one hand, I appreciate all of the work that the government is doing, but just like when the CRA started doing autofill and having my account and stuff, there are things you can do to make it easier for people, and taxes are a lot easier than they once were. And so they have an infrastructure and a body of work and precedent and good minds to be able to figure these things out and understand how to convey them to people. But I understand that making it hard for business it makes sense. I don't know if people are going to take advantage otherwise, or it's just going to end up in penalties. It's a kind of a tricky situation, right, to deal with.
It is. Yeah.
The other big cost is rent. Yeah. And this is, commercial rents right now are just basically decimating the global economy. That's the theme that I'm hearing. It's like, okay, yeah, nobody's coming in. I can't pay my $15,000 rent. I can't stay open. It's a huge theme right now. So the government came up with the longest acronym thing, right? Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance. Now, of course, you mentioned previously that they call it the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program, which would be a CCRAP. So they don't call it that; they call it CECRA, I guess, right?
Yeah, they purposely dropped the P.
Well, and hopefully for good reason. But I'm also hearing that a lot of people are not really liking this program either. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so this program's being administered on the provincial and federal level. Okay. So what's happening is that the provinces are working with the federal government. So, like, for example, in Ontario, the acronym actually even gets grosser. It's like OCECRA, which is just a mouthful, right? And,
Ontario, Canada? Is that what they're saying?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how it is in other provinces, but the basic idea behind it is that, there is, I guess when it was originally launched, there was the impression that, commercial rent would be reduced by 75% for, the small businesses that were eligible for it, right?
Yeah, and sounds great. That sounds really good.
Yeah, it sounds incredible, right? But as, more and more information came out, we realized that, the application needed to be submitted by the landlord and not actually the small business themselves, right? So we have a lot of small businesses not small businesses, but landlords that, are just refusing to use this, right? Because one of the conditions for them is that they have to, essentially eat 25% of the cost of rent. And also, the administrative work to implement this is pretty bad. The program's actually launching tomorrow, so there's a lot of information that was just recently released. Yeah, and when I looked through it last, there's about 4 or 5 different documents, like attestations and contracts that need to be filled out to actually even approve for it. So it's not the most user-friendly program that's out there. Unfortunately,
this is big money, right? That's what it's because this is lots of money. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars probably for some commercial landlords, depending, like if they're running a mall or something like that. So what are some of these landlords saying? They're just going to either force the rent out of their tenants or just take no rent and evict the tenant? What are the options there?
So I mean, from my understanding is, the rights of the small business tenant is based on whichever province that you're in.
Okay.
And, for us in Ontario, it sounds like the provincial government has no restrictions on, whether small businesses can actually be evicted. Okay. Unlike, for residents. In
no
Ontario,
evictions for residents. Yeah,
yeah,
but
exactly.
not for businesses. Really? Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah, so
Okay.
that's not being implemented. The government's basically said that they're not happy that people or businesses may be evicted, but they haven't actually done anything to prevent it, right? Directly. So I mean, that would be kind of probably what the landlord would be looking at, right? Would be maybe they'll get a little bit of rent, and whenever they get a chance, they get new tenants, which is of course very sad because these businesses that would flourish in other situations.
Yeah.
And also just the landlord as well, like the work needed to find new tenants, and all that other back end work can just be overwhelming as well. It's just not turning out to be the program that I think that was expected.
Well, so we'll see how that goes. It's and these are obviously tenants who can't work from home or shift, right? Like it's usually people who have no choice. They're selling a product, a physical product. They're providing a physical service. Their food, things like that we can't. Maybe one day there'll be digital food that we can eat, but not now. It's not something that. It's one of the things like food is what you need, and that's one of the only. I don't even leave the house anymore. I get Instacart to deliver it to me, but that would be the only reason that I need to leave this house, right? And so in a way, you and I are privileged in that way that we are set up. I mean, to be able to work from home. But it's also just we made a choice that happens to work out, right? We just happen to be able to do things remotely and digitally, and we didn't pick the thing that involves working directly with people, being a tattoo artist, cutting people's hair, things like that, which, every single thing that is out there is a valid life choice if that's what you want to do. But no one made these choices based on whether they were pandemic-proof or not. Yeah. It wasn't something that we ever kept in mind, right? So those of us who are lucky enough to be in pandemic-proof jobs, like, I work for insolvency trustees. That's something. The last thing that people are going to miss is their insolvency payments. So maybe we're not saying, hey, come in and file now, file a new file, and if you don't have to because the courts are closed and there's no urgency and we don't know the future, etc. There's a lot of reasons to sort of hold on that right now. So maybe new business isn't coming in, but consumer proposals are set up for 5 years. So we have income, we have streams coming in, right? Mm-hmm. We're also paying out dividends too. But the cash flow of our business is still running, give or take. Unlike some people who have restaurants and their cash flow went to zero immediately, and that's such a contrast to the way the world works, right? And we need people doing all of these different kinds of things. So I guess that's where government steps in and tries to help, but people need to also step up and help others. There are some good commercial landlords, right? There's some stories out there, some good ones.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So they're not all bad, but it's, Doug Ford's been saying he's going to bring the hammer down and things, whatever his statements are, sayings about how he's just livid about these people. I think he might have even called them evil. People who don't seem to care, right? And it's all about money. I don't know. We'll see how that pans out. I mean, it just this is a really hard time for a lot of people, and it's easy for us to not see that if we're not directly involved with it.
Absolutely.
My parents run a bed and breakfast in Stratford, and the Stratford Festival season has been canceled, right? Yeah. So they are fortunate enough to be in retirement, and so they don't, they do rely on this to be able to. Well, they have a bed and breakfast, so they didn't mean to retire with a bunch of rooms available that are never going to be filled, but they're going to be okay in the short term. Mm-hmm. But at a certain point, we'll see, right? Hopefully this will all come back and the festival will be back next year. But not everybody's has, it's their house that they live in, and so they can just stay there, and they don't have to pay $15,000 in rent every month to be able to stay open.
Yeah.
or even closed, right, to be able to survive and maintain their business. So these are some of the challenges. So we got, is there a big acronym that I missed? Is there any alphabet soup that is very important that you had on your list that we didn't talk about?
Not exactly, but I think, maybe we should sit on the whole, being fortunate in our situation type thing, because, we really are, and it's important for us that are fortunate, to really, recognize that, right? So, like we were saying, we have the abilities to work from home. Thankfully, my partner too, she's able to work from home. So, we have
good.
that. But, we have individuals that, are possibly living by themselves, being forced to go to workplaces that are in extremely difficult situations. And, like you said, we don't directly see this, but it doesn't mean that it's not there, right? So, we need to, respect, appreciate that, and, help out where we can, right?
Yeah, and so, if you're thinking about tweeting about how you need a haircut, maybe you don't need a haircut. I don't need a haircut, right? I don't need haircuts ever. I get them sometimes, but it's not essential, and I don't know how to tell people that haircuts are not essential, because it seems to be that no one thinks that the people think that they're essential. Oh, I need a haircut, I'm going to go crazy. Not true. No. You can do things with your hair and you're going to survive. There are other things, maybe I would say more it's harder without social interaction, which is also not essential. Maybe you could argue in the long term, if we don't have social interaction for years, it could affect our quality of life or our life expectancy, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But for a short period of time, not so bad. That I would put ahead of a haircut. And needing to, go get the thing that you like at Home Depot or Canadian Tire. I think people are they're lashing out in ways, or they're complaining, or they're reacting, and that's fine. But I hope they don't really think any of these things are essential. It's just maybe just complaining about this and that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, like you just said, there are people who are in much worse situations. And it doesn't mean that you're not having a hard time and that things aren't inconvenient. But a lot of these things that we talk about that we need, and a lot of the things that people are protesting about that they need, are just conveniences.
Yeah,
they're not
absolutely.
necessities. And so perspective is huge right now. Really huge, right?
Yeah, most definitely. Like, I guess the listeners won't be able to see my hair, but I can definitely use a haircut. But you know what? I'm living with it. Just having fun with it, right? So
that's right. You acknowledge that yeah, you're used to the haircut. I guess not. I'll take a step back and realize not everybody can just pull their hair back like I can, and it might be like I can't. It's getting in my food, and I don't know what to do about it. What do I use? Elastics or barrettes or whatever it is, right? I mean, there are ways. We could have a whole show about that. How to live with long hair, which apparently is becoming a bigger topic. But yeah, recognizing that you don't need to go and put somebody else in danger. And force them to go back to work just so you can get a haircut, which is what a lot of people I'm hearing in the U.S. are doing. And there's a lot of opinions about what's essential and what's not. I mean, I think it's fair to say the haircut thing. I'm not going to get into whether going and congregating in religious services is essential or not. There's a lot of debate about that. There's a lot of debate about, seeing family, whether that's essential or not. I mean, just think about the risks for you, risk tolerance, what you're putting out there, how you're, the Trinity Bellwoods thing that happened. You're not that far from there. You're not close, but have you been watching what happened yesterday?
It's so frustrating.
Right?
I don't know if the numbers are right for those that may have not heard about it. But one of our news stations was saying that there was probably close to 10,000 people in this downtown park, and I don't see that being an accurate number, but there definitely were a lot of people, and definitely did not respect distancing and not congregating in groups under a certain amount. And
did you see the CTV clip about with the guy kissing the girl?
Oh yeah, I saw that too. That was
disturbing. So disturbing. Uncalled for, and any other day. Right, a regular day that don't kiss somebody without consent. First of all, though I mean she could argue that she gave consent, but it didn't look like it. Either way, CTV already apologized for airing that. But the whole idea of like they just met like a half an hour ago, and now who knows who has COVID, and it's those kinds of situations, right? That it's not about like if you go and sit in a park and you're in a group of 5 and everyone's 6 feet apart, which was not happening, by the way. I did the measurements. It did not look that like it's like 6 feet. I took out a measuring tape earlier, and 6 feet is way further than you can think. People they're saying like a hockey stick or a larger hockey stick is a good measure. It's a good measure for Canadians to use, right? But they weren't doing that. And then on top of that, there were bigger groups, and then there was the kissing, and if we saw that, I imagine what else, and everyone's sharing food, and it just feels like a nightmare to me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the kind of thing that's going to, extend the pressures on, the vulnerable individuals and businesses, has the potential to continue, cause a further lockdown, if it turns into something larger, which we hope it doesn't. But, after seeing that, like, it definitely has potential to do that.
That's the thing, right? We don't know a lot of things. We don't know what's going to happen, and people can argue both ways. We're being too cautious, or being not cautious enough. I don't know. I say err on the side of caution until we have more information. Yeah. That's my opinion on this, and I know there's people in both camps, and I want to respect people's freedom to decide. But in this case, you're deciding, and then you're going to hang out with somebody else, and is everyone making a conscious decision, that they understand? There's a lot of references in comparison back to the AIDS situation, early transmission, back 40 years ago, right? 30 years ago. Actually, wait a minute, it's 2020, yeah, more than 40 years ago. Wow, it's been so long, right? My uncle passed away in 1993, and so I think about these things. And he lived with HIV for a long time. He had but he died like way too young in his 40s, and a lot of this comparison is like, oh yeah, we don't whatever, we got to live our life, and it results in people dying early sometimes, right?
Yeah,
and we still don't have the stats out for COVID, but there are kids and there are younger people who are being affected, and even if they're not dying, they have long-term respiratory issues that are coming up. Yeah. It's not great to have this, even if you don't die. It's not great to go and have it and then potentially expose somebody else who could die.
Absolutely.
So, I don't know. That's this is my show, so I can talk about this stuff. But I just want people to think about all of these sides before you make your decision. I never want to tell you what to do, right? And even with financial stuff, with this government stuff, we're just trying to give you our perspective on the information presented, maybe in a way that you never had it before, or you didn't think about it this way or that way. You still do whatever you want, but think about how it affects other people. I think. All
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah. I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. Well, that is a good place to end it before I start ranting anymore, eh? Thanks so much for coming on the show. And it's just nice to distill this stuff a little bit, and keep doing whatever you're doing. I'll put the links to your site, and whatever other resources you want to send me, I'll just copy and paste those links in the show notes, so that people can contact you, and you can help them decipher what's what. You're doing individual coaching too, right? Any of that?
Yeah, so doing individual coaching and also webinars. Those are kind of the two areas that I've been concentrating on now. Actually doing a big webinar with the Toronto Public Library on Wednesday, I believe. They're looking at branching out to offering online services through because normally they would do presentations in branch, right?
Yeah, in branches.
And so now they're looking at creating an ecosystem to offer things online, and this is one of the pilot projects to do it. So on Wednesday we're going to be doing that. Yeah.
So that's public. Is anybody can join?
Yeah, totally. I'll send you the link to it. I think they have one already set up. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm publishing today, so it's the 24th today. So that means what is that? It's on the 27th.
Yes. Yeah.
So
and it's
Wednesday, May 27th.
Yeah, and I believe it's 5 to 6 Eastern Standard Time.
Okay.
Believe
So,
it's them.
you know, anybody listening from around the world probably could tune into that, right?
Yeah, totally.
They
If they want to
don't
learn
have to
about our
be.
benefits.
That's right, exactly. If you want to learn more about the Canadian system and you're not listening from Canada, want to tune into that. You listen to this show, why not see another live webinar, right? And is it a situation where people could ask questions? Is that kind of webinar, or is it
Yeah.
interactive?
So it's going to be questions through chat.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. That sounds awesome. Okay. So yeah, send me all that stuff. Thanks for coming on. So yeah, next week I'm gonna continue the world tour, and if all goes well with the time zone change and availability and everything, I'll have a friend of mine from Singapore is going to be on. He's gonna let us know what's happening there, and this is a guy who's lived in a lot of places in the world, including Toronto, and traveled all around, and he travels for work, and so I'm pretty sure he's grounded now. So we'll talk about that too, in terms of how that's affecting his life and his ability to do what he would normally do. A lot of people are affected by this kind of thing, and but we'll just see what's going on in Singapore, and if they have different stuff going on there, and if it's better or worse, or it's just a matter of connecting with the rest of the world just to see. Is it just us, or are other people doing good things, bad things? How are they handling this pandemic? And maybe we can pick up some tips on how to handle it better ourselves. So thanks for listening today, and I'll see y'all next week.